On the Systems OneDrive folder, I've added a couple of new JavaScript files. These are actually jQuery files. Okay, so in order to use them, you have to import the latest and greatest version of whatever you want jQuery. The first one is a NumericKeyPress. As I said before I started the recording, I've been promising Brittany I'd update my NumericKeyPress so that it would work in Chrome. This one's also written in jQuery, and it is cross-browser compatible. I've tested it on all 4 browsers. I want to say I'm using IE 11, but I'm not positive what I have in my office. But I did test it in Chrome. I did test it in Firefox, and Firefox was the odd duck here, believe it or not. Firefox, for some reason, has different key code that they assign to keys than everybody else. I don't know why. It's happened to me a couple other times in the past. Tested it in Opera, and who's missing? Chrome. So it all works. The other thing I've put up here is AreYouSure. The AreYouSure JavaScript gets attached if you attach it to any page with a form. Would not allow you to leave that form if it's dirty. So if the user it will allow you, I'm sorry, but it'll ask you, it'll prompt you before it leaves, so you get a warning. It's kind of like, are you sure you want to leave without saving? It does use submit buttons to bypass that, so if you hit the submit button, it doesn't ask any questions. It figures you are saving and off it goes. But it doesn't let you, or it prompts you before you leave a page. I'll demonstrate that before we get done here. My test for all of this is called NumericKeyPress test. That's also up there. I've already downloaded it, and so it should be available to me in my local host. I'm going to demonstrate it first, and then we'll take a quick look at the code, and then we'll be done. So it's a very simple form. All I wanted to test, come on, get bigger. There we go. All I wanted to test was, does my keypress event intercept keys? I have not tested this on a Mac, so I'm a little leery, but so far so good. Those were letter keys. This is an integer key field. So it'll take my integers, but it won't take my decimal point, because it senses that that's an integer field. This field is a step 01 field. Okay, so it'll take decimals, and it has a min value that is less than 0, so it'll also take a minus sign. The other one will not. The one flaw that I have not been able to figure out how to correct is this. If the user puts multiple minus signs at the beginning, only at the beginning, without any other number, it's cool. The reason for that is in my notes. I'll explain it when we get there. Just know that that's a flaw. Still doesn't take any letters, but it does take digits and 1 decimal point. Everything you find on the web, everything I found on the web, will block the decimal points if you want them to, will block the minus signs if you want them to, but they're not smart enough to say have to be at the beginning, or there can only be 1 decimal point. So mine takes care of that. You can put in too many decimal places, but then the numeric field takes care of it. Now I have not tested this, so now I'm going to try to navigate away from this page, and there's AreYouSure. Okay. It's not much you can change about this. I don't think that message is changeable, but there isn't much we'd want to change anyways. You have unsaved changes. Are you sure you want to leave? You can leave, but if you stay, then you stay.
The envelope, the image there, is that hard coded into that?
Is what?
The image, the Google.
No, that changes with every browser.
So it just is the browser.
The browser. This is a browser message that is built into the browser. So if you're using IE or if you're using Firefox, it has a different appearance. I don't think we can change that to be a lion. I'd be surprised, because I think it's just, we can take a quick look. I'm not a real expert on this.
I know
AreYouSure?
On the Windows, it's just you get an image.
Pardon me?
That's just like an alert, isn't it?
Right. It's basically an alert.
Yeah, because in Windows you don't even get that image. You just get.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you get a gray box. That's right. In my office, I got a gray box. So it depends on the environment that you're in. Depends on the browser. So all that seems to be working. Go ahead.
The
does not add commas. We can't because these are number fields, and number fields don't like commas. We can't add dollar signs. Justin's got the solution to the dollar sign thing because the back Bootstrap has a cool little pre thing that you can attach to the front of a text box. You can put a dollar sign in there. It looks really cool. So we can't format for dollar signs in a numeric field, and you know me, I'm real hung up on these numeric fields. We got to use the right type so that if somebody's on the web and they want to type in here, they get the right keyboard, especially on a mobile device. But if I test my form, then off it goes, and everything's copacetic. So let's take a look at the code for that real quick. And then we'll call it a day. Again, both of those files are stored on OneDrive. All you need is the JS files, and what this little program shows you is how simple it is to bring both of those in. My index file here contains the JavaScript, no big deal. I don't know why there's 2 copies of AreYouSure, but there are. Okay, so here's the AreYouSure. Just link it to the appropriate JavaScript file. Right now I have it in Voker Tools, but we just have, I don't know what you guys are planning for lines. Probably have a lines or JavaScript folder. We'll throw it all in there. So that's it. All you have to do is add my NumericKeyPress and add AreYouSure, whichever one you want. And then one other thing you need to do is in the actual JavaScript itself. This is the JavaScript for this project. In there, you need to include the document ready function. Remember, this is the shortcut version of document ready. This is basically jQuery's version of window onload. And the first time I tested this, I figured, in my notes it says I haven't figured out a way. Well, I discovered one. Notice that initially I tied both text.value and text.currency to the same event. That's the other thing to recognize about this. There's no more decimal, integer, whatever, because currency's gone. And I've made, I hope, I have made this function smart enough to figure out whether it's dealing with decimal places or not. And I'll show you how I did that. So I've got one function that handles any text field, and what I also then remembered when I was reading my jQuery notes is there's a way to link to any number. So this is the only line you really need to add to use NumericKeyPress on every single numeric entry on that form. Isn't that nice? Don't have to list them all like we did before in JavaScript. Okay, so with this selector, which is give me the input type number, this attaches that function to them. Now at every key press, it kicks in. And this is all you have to do, and you copy this verbatim. This is not the name of my form. This is another jQuery selector for any form on this page. And this is only one page, but any form that brings this JavaScript in will automatically include the AreYouSure.
And you can do that by classes. You can do that by pretty much anything on a DOM.
You can, yes.
Right. Like your input thing up there.
This one here?
Yeah, you can do it on like divs with IDs or whatever you.
You can, but you wouldn't want a key press on those.
Not a key press, but I'm just saying to.
Yes, to select, there are gazillions of ways to select different things in jQuery.
So in Bootstrap, the errors go in divs. They don't actually go on the input or anything.
Right.
So yes, we'll have to put like IDs on the divs or something.
No, because these aren't divs; these are still inputs. So this is tied to the input.
Right, but when we're calling them through jQuery is what I mean.
Calling who through jQuery?
Any of the divs that we would need to call to put an error on them.
Yeah.
No,
That one effect is.
You got ahead of me here, or what?
This
no.
can just go in the JavaScript for our index page once, and that covers everything, then, doesn't it?
We could, but then you're actually adding all this JavaScript to pages that don't have a form on them. And both of these are really form objects. They're only applied to forms. So if you've got lists that don't include forms, if you've got pages that are displaying results like reports, you might not want to include these. So we could put them in the header. Okay. Or who was it? John was saying the Bootstrap tutorial says put them in the footer. That way your JavaScript include files, these guys, if you put these in the footer, they load last and your visual part of your page pops up before the JavaScript tries to load. And if you've got a lot of JavaScript, at least the user thinks their page is ready to go.
And that would actually work on the index, because if you don't need them, it won't matter if it takes longer, to load that page, because the page itself will load and you'll just be bringing in JavaScript you're not actually using.
Yeah, but I still wouldn't want to bring in a whole lot that I don't need. I don't think.
I don't think it would affect performance that much though, because you're ready to go with what you need as far as the page.
But if we bring in, we need AreYouSure, we need NumericKeyPress, and then we need Lions JavaScript, and who knows, and we need jQuery and all of this stuff. I don't know we need it on every page. And if we don't need it on every page, are we wiser to leave it off and just plug it into the bottom of the view and say this view needs the form stuff? I think it's wiser, since we have the ability, that's part of what we're on, have the ability to change those things. Okay, so that's the basics for setting this up. In your main page, and this, where these JavaScript links go, that's what we were just talking about. My suggestion would be at the bottom of the view that needs them. So you bring the JavaScript in. These are the two new things that I'm providing. And then in the JavaScript file itself, there is a window on load for just about every one of yours. If you're doing jQuery, it looks like this. You might have the words document ready on there, because that's the long version of it. This is the short version of document ready, that's all. It's the same thing. Window on load. These can go away because this links NumericKeyPress to every numeric input on the form, and this does the AreYouSure and pops it up. Other than that, you put the files, the two JS files, in your library and bring them in. That's it. It should function. I do want to look over them just briefly. I have added documentation, so if you forget how to bring these in, you link to your favorite jQuery, you link to AreYouSure using that command with your own path. And then in document ready, you add this. But if you look at this, that's a fairly big hunk of JavaScript. And we could probably minimize it, and it's not really that big, but what it does is uses more jQuery to go through every object on the form that has one of these field selectors. And it picks just about everything. The only thing I did is took out hidden, and I put that in the documentation. I think that because we sometimes, and we might still do this, say that jQuery or JavaScript has validated this form. If JavaScript has validated it, that is a hidden field, and this was checking my hidden fields, and I was changing it every single time, saying JavaScript took care of this. And I'd get a dirty message even though we didn't touch anything that was visible. So I took the hidden fields out of what they're checking. But then it goes through, and you can have a class that's called asysignore, which basically says don't mess with this one for AreYouSure. Right? You can ignore certain fields if you want them to be ignored, but I don't do that. But then it just goes through and deals with everything, checks to see if it's changed. So that's all I know about that one, because I stole it. Here's the source.
Okay, so if you leave a page after clicking submit, it doesn't do that.
No, it bypasses the submit. The submit bypasses this. The code in here doesn't process submits. So that's how you get around it. Or you say, yeah, I know what I'm doing. Get me out of here anyway. Now this is the one that I wrote. And this one's in jQuery. I'm thinking about going back and trying to simulate it in JavaScript. But the problem with JavaScript is that the browsers all sense keys on key up, key down, key press at different times. And at different values and in different ways using different variables. And so I decided that my first stab at this was going to be jQuery. Plus it helped that I found one to get me started. So here's what this looks like. Again, this is where I found it. That's where the foundation of this came from. This function checks keys intercepted by not really key press, that's key down, that's a typo, in any numeric input box. It has to be a number. Doesn't do anything for text boxes. That's what this was designed for, is numbers. Okay. Only accepts digits. unless the input that we're looking at includes a step that has a decimal in it, then it'll take a decimal point. So instead of writing a whole separate KeyPress routine just for the stupid decimal point, occurred to me, one of those brilliant ideas that hits me and go, geez, I can, using jQuery and even using JavaScript, I can look inside the step property. And if the step has a decimal point in it, then I allow 1 decimal point. If the minimum value is less than 0, then I allow a minus sign. If you don't designate a min, then I'm assuming that it's 0, because that's how that thing works, and it doesn't accept minus signs. Again, linking this is pretty straightforward, jQuery, and this says head tag, but you can put it in just about anywhere. And then in document ready, put in this command to link to every single numeric field on the form. As we saw, it allows multiple minus signs. The reason for that is the way you sense whether or not I'm at the beginning of the field is you look at the value, right? We learned that in jQuery last semester. I look at the value of this, which is whatever object caused this to occur. Okay. I look at the value, but when you look at the value, it automatically, because it's a number field, automatically converts it to a number. And so if it's got 6 minus signs in it, it treats it as undefined, it treats it as the empty string, because it can't convert it to a number. 1 minus sign, 6 minus signs, no minus signs all revert to nothing because 1 minus sign is not a valid number. Okay. So that's a flaw here. If they type a couple of minus signs, the numeric field is going to wipe it out. I have not been able to find a way to get the text that's inside of a numeric field. If there's a way to do it, I couldn't find it. So the way this beast works is it works on the key down function. Okay. This refers to whoever. These are the delete key, the backspace key, the tab key. I don't know why I'd want a tab key. Some of these I'm tempted to take out. Why would I want an escape key? Why would I want an enter key in my numeric field? Okay. Probably the tab key so I can move to the next one. I don't know if it works. I haven't tried it. But I know I've tabbed. And maybe enter lets me move to the next field as well, which would be convenient. And here's where I'm grabbing. And where did these came from? That was in the code that I stole. Here I grab the value. This is the contents of that box right now. But the value, again, only returns to me the numeric value of what's in there. I then check to see if the minimum attribute is set. If the minimum attribute is undefined, I use -1. -1, is that right? Yes, and I allow negative numbers, because if you don't set a minimum, the numeric value will work. You can go down past 0 if you don't set a minimum. Okay, so that's why it's -1. Otherwise, I use whatever the minimum is, and then I check. If the minimum is less than 0, again, if it's not defined, I allow negative numbers. If it's less than 0 and the value is still empty, then let them type dashes. There's 2 different dash codes. One for the regular keyboard, one for the numeric keyboard, and one for Firefox. That one's well documented. It started way back in Firefox 15, and Firefox for some reason, Mozilla for some reason is going, hey, that's what we're doing. Shut up and live with it. Good news is there isn't any other character that we would want that's labeled number 173 that causes problems in any of the other browsers, so that's not an issue. Doesn't seem to be. I stuck it in there. If it causes trouble, we might remove it and say don't use Firefox, but that's not realistic. IE, Opera, everything I've tested this on, they seem to work the same once I put the 173 in there. Without the 173, Firefox did not recognize a minus sign. So there's my logic. I grab the minimum from this object, and if it's less than 0 or undefined, and we're at the beginning of the field, we haven't typed any numbers yet, then you can type a minus sign. And if you're so inclined, you can type as many as you want. I cannot find a way around it. Then, I take a look at the step attribute. If it's undefined, I set it to 1, because that's its default anyways. And if it is defined, I grab it. And if the step attribute includes a decimal point, That's what this means. If the index of the decimal point is greater than -1, I found the decimal point. If it includes a decimal point and there is no decimal point in the value, that's how it prevents any further ones. You only get one. Then include the 2 decimal point characters, and lucky for us, Firefox recognizes those. Again, that's the first one is the regular keyboard, and the 190 is the numeric keyboard.
What happens if you use, instead of value, you use text?
It gives you the contents of a paragraph, for instance, not the contents of an input object. Because an input object's a one-sided tag, it has no text. I looked.
Okay.
Trust me.
No,
And contents as well. Text does not work. It cannot be used on numeric fields because it gives you all the text that's inside the entire DOM structure, whatever you're looking at. And it doesn't work. If you look at the documentation, that was how I knew it wasn't going to work. Documentation says this cannot be used for form attributes or form objects. So then I tried contents, and that gives you, again, the contents of a paragraph, the contents of all those other things. And what we're looking at here is not the contents of a 2-sided tag. It's a one-sided tag. Value seems to be the only thing that's left over. You find a solution. I've got crumbs of my Butterfinger here. You can have the crumbs. All right, so what these do, if it's appropriate, we add minus signs and decimal places to the list of acceptable characters that are not digits. The authors of this wrote some good code, allows Control A. So they're looking at the key code to see if it's an A, and if the control key is down, then we allow it. So if it's in this array of special characters, or it's Control A, or it's one of the cursor movement keys, then it says return, and it's happy. It's kind of like saying, don't do anything, let it go. What I'm tempted to add here is Control C, V, and X, because they're not there. This might prevent us from using shortcut keys for copy, cut, and paste. But the right click still works. So in my spare time, I'll think about upgrading that. Then, if we haven't returned from here because it wasn't one of these, then we check to see, is the shift key down? This was interesting. Somebody said if the shift key is down, and it'll take the stars, and it'll take them because the key is still the number 8 with a shift key. If it's same thing on the numeric keypad. So the first thing they said is if the key is down, or it's less than 48, that's a 0, or it's greater than 57, that's the 9, and the numeric keypad values. Then if it's any one of those, so it's in that, if it's out of range of good keys, and these have already been handled, if it's out of range of good keys, this is the definition of a bad key now, not a numeric key. Then we prevent the default event from whatever this key press it would normally do. And that's what prevents it from showing up on the screen. And it looks like I still got some excess stuff left here from all the things I was trying. There were different ways I was dealing with some of this stuff. I thought about putting if statements in here, and I'm more ors. If it's in the array, or it's a Control A, or it's an arrow key, or it's a minus sign and we're accepting minus signs. Could have done it that way. I chose to add the numbers to this instead. For a while there, I had a dynamic function where you could send in a string of extra characters that you wanted to accept, like the decimal point, like the minus sign. And then I realized that's it. And the light bulb went on and said, I know if there's a decimal point allowed, and I know if a minus sign is allowed by looking at the min and looking at the step. So this is the only event you need for key presses on a numeric field.
Where did you import your jQuery to?
Where did I do my what?
Did you import?
My jQuery is in here? No, it's in index. In the form, in the view, right there.
Oh, so you use an HTTP instead of like downloading the file?
Yeah.
Is that what we should do
Yeah.
instead?
I'm using the most recentest one there, and so I have to have a web connection to test this and run it. So I have not downloaded it, no. Never have. I don't have too many computers that I'm writing this stuff on that aren't connected to the internet anymore. So that's what I found. What's still on my list, because did I send that list to everybody? I think I did. Brittany asked me the question, and I said, here's what I'm covering today, and this is a big old long list of stuff. These are two important parts of it. The other thing I still want to take a look at, and this is my problem, I think, maybe ask for your help here. The next thing I'd like to take a look at is using AJAX to check for the last piece of validation that we can't do with HTML5. And that's a duplicate record check. It would be nice to not have to leave the form, because what's really a pain, and Sheila can tell you this because we did it that way in the past, what's really a pain is we take all the form data, send it to the server and say, here you go, and the server goes, duplicate record. We got to pick up all that data, put it in another variable, send it all the way back, and plug it into all the fields. Painful. However, the only way around that is AJAX. JavaScript. JavaScript has to be on. Otherwise, if JavaScript is off on the server side, I have to do the validation there. And if it's bad, I have to reload the details, send them back to the form and say, I already got this record in my database. So my first solution is I've done AJAX. I tried to figure out what I did last year, and I can't see it. So I got to work with that a little bit. But when you test, to have it after it's validated everything on the form, go right out to the server and say, run that query with this array. That's another down. Well, we know what the logical keys are, right? That's all we're checking for anyways. So if my logical keys are first name, last name, it's a bad example. I can send the first name, last name to a PHP function that goes into the database, looks for a record, counts how many there are with that first name, and sends back the count. And if the count is greater than 0, then I display an error marker. That's my plan. But I still think I have to run that on the PHP side, on the server side. Because if the JavaScript is off, which is what we've been trying to fight with here, if the JavaScript is off, that's not going to work. There's no way that AJAX works with JavaScript off. So then I have to let the server do it. But we can also communicate to the server that, hey, JavaScript took care of it. JavaScript is on, server. You don't have to worry about checking the database again to see if this record is there. Just go ahead and save this because it's valid. So that's on my list. The bad news is, because we're still stuck with the PHP, the server-side validation, we have to find a way to send this data back and display it on the form in the right fields. And I know how to do that. I just need to show it to you. But in the meantime, I think right now you can, when you're building your forms, just assume they're going to be empty to start with. No, they can't be. We can't assume that. We can't assume that. So on Monday, my plan is to show you a form and what extra stuff you got to add to it. It isn't much. To say, did we get some data from the server that we're supposed to show on this form? Because a lot of your forms are edit forms, right? Take the existing data and change it. How do I get the existing data into those fields? Send an array, suck all the stuff out, put them in the right places. Better idea?
No, I was just saying the edit form should be the new form as well, right?
Yes, I don't like to have duplicate forms because they're the same forms. And so you send it an array, and if the array is empty, it's new and everything's nice and fresh and clean. If it's got something in the array, then you take the values out of the array and plug them into the appropriate places on the form. It's not terribly hard. It's just another one of those tedious things that you have to add to every single field. And where it really gets fun is where you have combo boxes and I need to select the appropriate option. Radio buttons, I need to select the appropriate option. Can all be done. I'll show you how. So that's still on my list, and I don't remember what else I had on the list. Brittany, you got it up there? Probably not. I'll get it. Okay, key press for Chrome, yay, done. No save warning, yay, done. Duplicate record and typical form cases. No, I don't have that handy either, but what cases do we normally have? And if every one of us names them pretty much the same way, that makes life a whole lot easier. We have a case for lists. If I need a list of emergency contacts, a list of guardians. Have an edit field, which is also the insert field, but those are two cases. We just have to sort out the difference. And there's a save, and there's an update, and there's a delete, I think. We're going to have the delete. So there are typical cases that we do for every single form. And I wanted to share that with you so you could start building your own cases file and just put little echo messages in there saying you selected delete. Doesn't do anything, but at least you know that you've linked back to the server and the server's received the right message. So that's all on my list for Monday. Well, for today, I promised Justin 3.5 hours of systems to work on your forms. And you don't need to make your forms pretty. If you want to make the forms pretty, talk to Justin or talk to your local Bootstrap expert. Somewhere, I think it's still in my inbox here, I can forward the Bootstrap files that Justin and I picked out yesterday. I think it's still here. This is the most stuff I've had in my inbox in 85 years sent, but still, it's the most stuff I've had in my inbox. It's that long in 85 years. Not that old. There. I'm going to forward this to all of you. And really, all you have to do is take this file, put it in your CSS, and then remove your CSS link and put this one in instead. And it pretties it all up, right? Isn't that basically what we discovered yesterday?
I just put it in CSS file, leave it as Bootstrap.
It's a Bootstrap folder, right?
Bootstrap folder, not within the CSS folder.
Okay, so you have a Bootstrap folder. There is no CSS folder. And instead of linking to the CSS folder, you link to bootstrap.css in the Bootstrap folder. Is that what it's called? Bootstrap? Yep. And it'll pretty up your form. So you just throw on forms with labels and stuff. And then, Justin, you don't include in here a sample input that's horizontal, right? Because that one was a little trickier. Because it takes 3 divs, doesn't it? It doesn't have a div around it, a div around the label, and a div around the other part, and they have to have the right names.
My assignment,
Pardon me?
with my tip calculator, I'll bring it up real quick.
Yeah, send it. I'm going to forward this one while he sends me that one. I'm going to send them to the system. Sheila, do you want the Bootstrap file?
Sure.
Sure. Make it difficult. And how many of you are planning on sticking around after 6 today to watch the Bootstrap files?
After 6, no.
1?
I can't, but I will start it.
I was going to say, I can do the same thing because I have an account. So, Paul, if you want to stick around and just watch it on that machine.
Sure.
What is it again?
It's a tutorial about 2 hours long, introducing you to what Bootstrap can do and part of how you communicate with it. Bootstrap is just a pretty it's a CSS file. It's pre-built CSS, structured pre-built CSS that makes things really pretty. And if it wasn't 2 hours, maybe. If you don't, the alternative is, I'm going to go see during the break here, or during your 3.5 hours, I'm going to see if I can change the password. The only reason I don't want to share my link to it is right now I have my own password in there and I don't want to share it with you. So if I can change the password to something innocuous like MSTC 2015 or something, I'll change it and then I'll share it with you and you can watch it wherever you want in your own time.
Should be in your inbox. just putzing with it. I can't remember if I took out what I was trying to do. So if you get an error, I'll tell you why.
Okay. This should be runnable, right? So we can see what it looks like as well.
And that's got that Space Labs theme in it right now, I believe.
Oh, does it? Okay.
But it really doesn't show a whole lot just because it's.
No, you had the dollar sign in there, didn't you?
Yeah, but it's like 3 fields. It doesn't have like a
Yeah, it's not a lot, but
radio buttons and all the cool.
it's still pretty good.
Stuff.
But this is part of what Bootstrap does. Gives you this kind of a title. Bootstrap's got a ton of stuff that we can use for nav bars and drop downs and everything we want, everything we can dream up. Has these prefixes like the dollar sign. Notice it's gray, so we don't have to worry about formatting it. If we were doing percents, we could stick that down here. Buttons have certain styles to them. Everything is but got auto caps.
In that right there.
Okay, so we don't have to do the title case. So as I'm typing here, it capitalizes it. I'm typing all lowercase. So that's cool. How does it do with my wife's name? Probably not so good.
It doesn't do well with that.
It even changes it. That's not good. Be nice if it would just let me type whatever I want and capitalize the first letter
You
for me.
don't have to use it, but it's.
Well, yeah. Okay, but mine doesn't. Mine does that, but it has other issues. So how does it deal with little words?
Same thing. It just auto caps everything.
Okay. So that's a feature. We can use it or we can avoid it depending on what's going on.
So it's more proper case and title case.
Yeah. It has image resizing, so that image will scale to the size of the window.
Cool.
And notice the labels and
Notice they start stacking after a while.
So we're already compliant with smaller devices as well.
Getting pretty close. Well, this one is not necessarily because we could do different things to make it more compliant with a smaller device because you don't have any device stuff in here, do you?
But that
You do?
looks like a phone layout right there.
I have it. I think it's
Yeah.
if you bring up the code, it'll.
Yeah, that's where I'm going next. Okay. So back to brackets. And I will forward this to you as well because you all have your tip calculator in, so we're nothing terribly critical there. Docs. Right. And 4. So here's his view. Anything exciting in there? Absolutely nothing. How about in there? Not much, except here's the link to Bootstrap, CSS, Space Labs.
And JavaScript.
Right. And there's a JavaScript jQuery library. That's just jQuery, right? That's not a special one for Bootstrap. That's just jQuery.
Right. To use some of the functions you have to have.
Right. In my notes from last semester, Unit 27, whatever it was, for jQuery, it shows you how to bring it in from the web. He has downloaded jQuery, probably a relatively current version, and is using that.
Yeah.
That's offline.
We just use the line from your other sample.
Yep. Either one. So here's this image. Notice it's an image, but where's the stuff? Oh, there it is. Okay. Image responsive center block. This is what, when you learn, I've used that term loosely. When you learn Bootstrap, this is what you learn. What are all the classes that are
It's
available?
just classes, basically.
It's
all
all, that's
classes.
what it is. A ton of classes that are predefined to work well together, including some that give you access to the portability and put me on a mobile device.
That's in the.
They
That's in
didn't have
there.
their own date pen maker, did they?
No,
I'm
not
just
it-
asking.
no,
Yeah.
Not really.
Because mine, I still haven't tested it with JavaScript off. My suspicion is it still works, except you can't click on the little icon. I think all the JavaScript is doing is linking the icon to the drop downs. The drop down should still function.
Although they
And when
might-
you
they might
save
have-
the downside, it may not put all those together again. I'm not sure. So that date picker, even though it's cool, kind of goes against my what if JavaScript is off. And I'm leaning more and more toward John's idea of, too bad, don't use my site. Drive to Lions can't fill out a paper form if you can't turn on jQuery or JavaScript.
It's
Okay.
another scope thing.
Yeah. Here's another form. Okay. Notice the class. It's a form group. Now the form group is how you do these horizontal forms where the label is on the left and the object is on the right. Unless there's no room, then they tuck underneath. But unless you do this form group, you don't get a horizontal form. And I want horizontal forms.
So do we have to do that for every?
You have to do that for every, here's the second field, for every single field,
Versus what we were doing with your form layout. It's
You had to do
basically
classes.
the same thing.
basically. Okay.
You
So
can-
here's a div for the group. Here's a label for whoever, but the control itself, the label itself has a class. And then there's a div for the input. Why column small 4, I'm not sure.
It's the break.
It's a what?
The break is a set. So when it gets to a small
Oh,
screen,
okay.
breaks it at column when it's 4 wide.
So it's a little bit of extra code, but they all, when it's 4 grid parts wide, when it's not that wide, then it breaks. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. The form itself has its own class. It's horizontal. So adding this div and this div to every one of your inputs, that ain't so bad. And I think we should go with this same feature so that when it does get too small, the window gets too small, they break and tuck underneath, and hopefully they'll look good on a phone.
Are we going to use SM?
Yeah, let's just use the same one.
There is XS too,
XS, extra small, right?
if you want. I just picked SM because I did. There was like,
Yeah. That's something we could probably do a massive search and replace using brackets or notepad and say, go through the entire folder and let's replace them all.
and so if you were to change, right now, that's saying that input should be 4 columns wide. You can, if you want the input to be smaller, instead of using size equals 20 or whatever, you could make that 3, and that'll shrink that input. So that's kind of how you manage the
So this
size.
text box, notice it doesn't have any size stuff because that's all embedded in those classes. Classes have the size embedded somehow.
And it inherits everything from its parent class. So you can have rows within rows, and because there's a class row with an outline to put a nice box around something if you want.
But I will forward this to you. And so today when you're working on 3 hours and 15 minutes of systems, okay, you can immediately start putting these things in there, because what happens when the class doesn't exist? Your form just looks ugly. Invoker said we don't care. If you want to see what it's going to look like when it's pretty, then all you need is, at least I guess there is a bootstrap.js file.
Yeah, that's in the Bootstrap folder.
Okay, so there's a couple of pieces that you need. You need a bootstrap.js, you need the CSS, which he had in his view. Is that in the header? Yeah.
Which really we could put the JavaScript in the header to keep all Bootstrap in one spot.
Probably a good idea, because I don't see us not using Bootstrap on any page. And right now we're building forms so we can be pretty consistent, but later if we have time to do reports and a few other things,
So basically, if we just use the same classes and everything, all of our forms that we're doing separately will look the same.
as soon as you plug them into the system, they'll all look the same.
And
What I
you
do is I build it once, copy and
reports.
paste, and just put it in the middle.
You just, if need be with reports, you just have a different header for the reports.
Right, but I also have different styles because I'm not using a form. So there'll be different styles. It won't be as easy, I'm going to say, as this, because as Justin said, we can simply cut and paste. You build one of these, put in the name for whatever it is you're messing with, and then change the type. What he doesn't have here is examples for radio buttons, but the recording shows you that. We'll learn what we need, and we'll go from there.
I don't know how many radio buttons we will have.
Don't know there'll be any. Might not be any. Could use them for some of the default. Some of those lookup tables are very small. We could use radio buttons for them to implement them. But then what we put on the form is kind of tied to the database. If the data changes, we got to change the form, but some of those, that's okay. I can live with that. I'm the one that's got to change it. So.
Well, you could
Or
put
you
that
dynamically
PHP.
create the elements as you go. I mean, that's what happens with my attendance tracker. When I take roll, every class is different. And it knows, it creates one of these, whatever that is, it creates one for every one of you dynamically in the PHP.
And you can create radio buttons the same way.
Do radio buttons exactly the same way. And we ultimately will fill combo boxes that way because all your data is coming out of the database. And whether you use what comes out of the database to fill a combo box or create radio buttons, it's really not that much different.
The other thing I don't have an example of on there yet is the
Nav bar.
errors either.
Errors too. Okay. You don't have errors in there?
Well, I have my JavaScript errors, but Bootstrap has its own errors where it turns the label red, outlines your input in red, turns the text inside the input red, and puts a red X right there for you.
Let's make sure you know that there's.
This one. Is it JavaScript or does it happen on submit?
It's a class, so you'd have to use jQuery to add the class to the div.
To add it to the div as the program is running.
Right.
On Blur, or when does it happen? Do you know?
You can do it on Blur. Like in my JavaScript, I changed the CSS on Blur, but you would like the CSS I have predefined, but you would just change it on Blur.
So right now you're using error markers like we did, right?
No,
With the
I'm
little,
using
changing color and stuff.
yeah.
Okay.
It's the same. It's close to the same, just looks nicer.
Got an example?
Yeah, but Bootstrap. No, Bootstrap.com or get Bootstrap. And I honestly don't have everything memorized, but this is the best resource once you've watched a few tutorials.
No, let's spell it right. Gotta be careful, probably end up at a porn site, right? Bookstrap.com, bootstrap.com. Shut up.
You did have that page.
Virus warning. Wow.
Ouch.
We call that Oracle.
Won't let me delete it here. I just want to step on it again accidentally. Oops.
CSS. Can you maximize your window a little bit? So the whole site is made with Bootstrap. That thing on the side is called Scroll Spy. It's actually really easy to do.
Notice as I scroll down, it highlights which sections I'm currently on in the document.
Click to it, but it
What happens when you shrink it down in phone size?
goes away.
Goes away.
Is it in typog?
So that's also a navigation bar too, isn't it?
Yes, I can click on it to jump, but it's also showing me as I go. It's called Scroll Spy. It's in the recording. It's pretty cool. It's not hard to do, but you can also designate that if I'm too small, it goes away.
I'll find it real quick because
That's an interesting navigation bar.
But look at all the classes that are in there, responsive tables and
it's
there
called
you
as
go.
warning. If you do a control that, whatever it is.
What did you say it was? Just warning?
Has warning. It might be in the components.
It's like has warning. Contextual classes warning.
That's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Type in error indicator.
Has error, has warning, has dash. Okay.
Yep, and then
So
if you
here's
go-
kind of what it
if you
does.
Go down a little bit more. was alluding to.
Mhm.
Because it'll, if you have an example somewhere, there it is. So you can have success, warning, error.
Cool.
Oh, so you can mark, instead of just marking this field as invalid, you can mark this field as valid.
Which might get annoying if depending on how.
Yeah,
many rows.
I'm not so sure I like that idea, but
Then
you can see it gets a little hairier. But really, if all we're doing is looking for errors for each one of those divs, instead of just form group, you say has error,
has error, has feedback.
and the feedback is the icon probably.
Nope, that is in the span. Nope, in that section.
Mm-hmm.
So down, label, input, span. After the input, and then the span on it.
Oh, here.
Yep.
So that's at the end.
You would just hide those and show them when needed. And you could give them the same name for like error,
Like we did
For
before. Error first name. Yeah.
and then the jQuery would find all of them and hide them and show them.
So notice here they have input error to status. Right? If you just name them like we were doing before with ERR something, then in your jQuery you just change the class, right, for the span? Or do you just hide the span?
You could hide it. You would hide the span and add has error to the div. I haven't fully thought it through, but that's how.
So you go to this div would have to have an ID then.
Yeah, you would have to have the div with an ID and the class with an ID. I would go with names and name them the same. But we don't have to do that. We can stick with just
Error markers.
Error markers if that's.
This isn't a bad look. I mean, red, red, red.
What's determining whether it has an error or whether it's valid? Is it just
Your JavaScript still does that. Right? And what your JavaScript has to do is instead of making the marker visible, it has to add a class to this object that has an error. And when you add the class, then it becomes red, and then the label becomes red, and the X shows up by add. So instead of adding a marker with text, you just change the color of this. But the downside of this is we'd have to change the title, or where do you put your error marker? Or how do you put your error text for what's wrong?
You would have to put the title in either,
Probably could put it in here.
probably in that span.
if we go through the
I know
trouble?
what we do at work is we put error text in another div, and we generate the text dynamically, but in a div below that, and we toggle the show on it based on what.
Mm-hmm. Just like we do with the marker right now, we toggle the show.
Right, you toggle the show on the div
Mm-hmm.
with text.
If we go through the trouble of marking them as valid,
No, I'm not planning on doing that.
as head-
So this one shows you what it looks like if it has this class attached to it.
I'm guessing we'll have to build some sort of method that everyone should use that copies the current class, adds has error, and then when you want to remove it, it only removes has error. So I don't know how jQuery works if you just say the class equals this, if it keeps all the classes that are in there, or just the one, or just adds that one.
I think you can add a class and remove a class.
Okay, I don't know.
I don't know how to do it either, but I think
I didn't know
I've seen
you
it
could do
somewhere.
one
Was it in the recording or
specifically
wherever it was that I found a way or I saw a way. And I can experiment with that a little bit. For right now, just use a little error marker, guys. Unless somebody's got a better idea that you can sell us on and we can copy. Until we got something we can copy, let's just go with what we're used to, the little red error marker that has a title.
I have the one that changes it red in my thing.
And it changes it like this.
No, it changes,
You had the whole background red, right?
it changes the background and outline.
Yeah, I didn't like that one.
It's a light red.
Too red. If it was a softer red, maybe, you know, a pinkish thing.
This is a toggle class function.
jQuery, right? So in jQuery, it's just toggle class. Is it parentheses dot toggle class?
Toggle class, parentheses, your class name, and then
True or false?
Yes. But inside the parentheses.
Mm-hmm. So it'd be pretty easy to do, by the sounds of it. So we would be toggling for this object, whatever, we'd have to give it a name. Toggle that has error. And then this is input error 2, input error 2. That's just the ID.
That span would have to get toggled as well, the hidden attribute.
Yeah, but that's what we're doing right now. We do that with an error marker, right?
Right.
We show
You
and
just gotta-
hide.
You gotta toggle both.
Well, this one you don't toggle, you toggle the style. Down here, you just take the whole thing out, right?
Right, you say true.
So this is a show versus that one is a change, just remove the style, toggle style.
And all you do is the div you name div with the name. Because it's not a text field and it's not an error marker, it's the div that contains it. You're gonna be toggling it in code.
Some open suggestions. Winner gets my crumbs, no one gets candy bar.
I'm with green, the div, just put a name on it, and then you can access it with jQuery and toggle that has error.
Go for it. Show us how. When you got one that works that you're happy with, you show it. And the rest of you want to play with some of yours, go with it. I'm going to try and change. Am I still recording? I sure am. I'm going to try to change my password so I can share my recordings. The problem is I only get 200 minutes, and I don't know how they count minutes. And I've already been at it for 120. I looked at it for at least 2 hours this weekend. So my trial is only 120 minutes. That changing my password may not be enough.
Where is this?
This is at bootstrap.com.
If
Oh,
that's
no,
what
it's
you
not.
just
It's at a different place.
Get Bootstrap.
Yep.
It's still the main website.
So we're not doing it at 6 o'clock.
We're not doing what?
Are you sure?
I can start mine because there's no class. I can start it here, throw it up on the screen. Hopefully the volume will be enough. If not, you can move in closer. And what I did is took furious notes while it was going, but I had the ability to pause. And I think it's 200 minutes of play, or unless it's 200 minutes of recordings. And if I play the same one 3 times, I don't think it counts 3 times. I don't know.
I can log in right now if you want to play.
That might be even better. You want to do it now?
I'm all for that.
Let's just do it now. And those of you who don't like the noise, go somewhere else, huh?
I do have a question.
Yep.
Are we discussing the table issue?
Systems.
Yes.